Growing up, the measuring stick for womanhood in our family was named Sophia. My sister, the golden child, the one with the glowing report cards, beauty pageant crowns, and a social media following our mother, bragged about to relatives who couldn't care less. Sophia walked into a room, and it was like the air shifted for her. People paused, heads turned, and my parents. They worshipped the ground she walked on like she personally paved it in gold. And me, I was just Emily. Plain old Emily. I didn't shine like she did. I didn't want to. I was the quiet one, the bookish one. The girl who tinkered with computers and wore hoodies instead of heels. The one who didn't post on Instagram or throw lavish birthday parties. My wins weren't visible, so to my parents, they weren't wins at all. Sophia went to a fancy business school. I went to community college. She majored in marketing and studied abroad. I studied IT and stayed home, worked part-time, and saved money where I could. They said she was ambitious. They said I was safe. What they meant was disappointing. Every phone call, every dinner, every holiday, it was all about Sophia. If I brought up something I did, it was followed by a question about her. Emily got promoted at her job. I once heard my aunt say to my mom, "Oh really?" A mom responded, "Sophia just signed a client who's launching a jewelry line. Isn't that amazing? They didn't see me." Not really, not unless I was standing in my sister's light. The night that cracked everything open wasn't special at first. It was a Sunday dinner at my parents' house, the usual spread of roast chicken, wine, and family gossip. Sophia was glowing, as always. She showed up in a designer coat, chatting loudly about a networking event she'd attended in L.A. The week before, Mom beamed at her like she hung the stars herself. "Everyone there wanted my business card," Sophia said with a flip of her hair. "I might even collaborate with that influencer. What's her name? Kenzie something." "Oh, Sophia," Mom gushed, "you're just going places. We always knew you would." Dad nodded proudly. "You've always had that spark, unlike some people who just to play it safe." He looked directly at me when he said it. I wasn't surprised. He'd made little digs like that for years, and I'd learned to just swallow the hurt. I took a bite of mashed potatoes and stayed quiet, but then it came, the sentence that would stay with me for days. "You know," he said casually as he reached for the salt, "I just wish Emily had a bit of what Sophia has. She's just half the woman Sophia is. Half the woman." The words hit me like a slap across the face. I stopped chewing. My fork clinked against my plate. I didn't say anything. Not right then. I just smiled that fake, tight-lipped smile I'd perfected over the years and excused myself to the bathroom. I locked the door, sat on the edge of the tub, and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. They would never see me, no matter how hard I worked, no matter what I did, unless I showed them. I looked at myself in the mirror. Same Emily, brown eyes, hair in a messy bun, simple makeup, a thrifted sweater. Nothing about me screamed golden child. But behind that quiet, unassuming reflection was a woman they didn't know. A woman who had built something from nothing. A woman who had kept a quiet, powerful secret for the past 3 years. A woman who had, without a degree from a fancy school or expensive networking events, earned $84,000 on her own terms, freelancing, coding, designing, selling digital products. Slowly, silently, strategically, they thought I was just surviving. They had no idea I was thriving. But they would, soon, very soon. 3 years ago, I was sitting at the tiny fold-out desk in my childhood bedroom, staring at a dusty old laptop with a cracked screen. I had just started my entry-level tech support job after graduating from community college. It paid just enough to help with bills, but not enough to make anyone proud. I remember telling my mom, "I think I'm going to try freelancing on the side." She barely looked up from her magazine. "You mean like fixing people's printers?" My dad laughed. "Emily, just focus on keeping a real job." A real job. They never took me seriously. They said I didn't have drive, like Sophia. She had internships, networking events, a mentor, business dinners. I had a refurbished laptop, a second-hand chair, and a fragile little dream. But that's how it started. At night, after work, I taught myself how to code better. I took online courses in UX/UI design. I watched free YouTube videos on how to build websites, how to manage clients, how to price services. I failed my first few attempts, bad clients, ghosted invoices, imposter syndrome screaming in my ear. There were nights I cried myself to sleep because nothing felt like it was working, but I kept going. I signed up on Fiverr, Upwork, and eventually found small clients who needed design work, websites, app mockups. Some paid $20, some paid $200. I reinvested every dollar. I upgraded my laptop, bought better software. Built a little portfolio. I stayed quiet about all of it. Every Sunday dinner, every phone call, I let my parents believe I was just doing tech support. Meanwhile, I was building something real, brick by digital brick. Then came the breakthrough. One of my clients referred me to a small e-commerce startup. They needed a full website build, branding, email automation, the works. The deal was worth $50,000. It terrified me. I had never quoted that much before. I almost apologized for the price, but they didn't blink. They paid it in full. I remember sitting there after getting the payment notification. $50,000 in my account. For work I had done on my own under my name, it wasn't just about the money. It was the first time I felt like I mattered. Like I was capable of more than the quiet shadow life they thought I belonged in. From there it snowballed. I built a brand. I launched a simple site selling UI kits and templates. Designers and coders started downloading them. I made digital products, video tutorials, passive income courses. I sold a build-your-own portfolio template that exploded on Reddit. One day I woke up to $3,200 in my account from a single product launch. In a year and a half, I had saved over $38,000. 2 years in, $62,000. Today, $84,391. 78 sitting across 2 savings accounts and an emergency fund. Not including the condo I'm preparing to put a down payment on in 3 months. And still, every time I see my parents, I let them think I'm just barely scraping by. Just quiet Emily, just enough to be half the woman my sister is. But what they didn't know is that Sophia, for all her glamour, was drowning in credit card debt, paying for image and clout she couldn't afford. The business she bragged about, she hadn't turned a profit in over a year. I knew that because she drunkenly vented to me last Christmas. But I never threw it in her face. I didn't need to, because I was playing a long game. The dinner invitation came 2 weeks ago. Sophia's birthday, a big family dinner at an upscale restaurant, the kind where waiters wear gloves and the bread costs extra. Everyone would be there, aunts, uncles, cousins, my parents, her boyfriend, her business partner. I almost said no. But then I remembered the look on my dad's face when he said I'd never be half the woman Sophia is. I smiled and I said yes. In the days leading up to the dinner, I pulled together proof. I wasn't going to throw money on the table and say, "Ha, I'm rich." That wasn't me. I wanted to show them. I created a presentation, just a clean, simple PDF portfolio, projects I had completed, testimonials, screenshots of sales, my bank balances with account numbers blurred, proof of my down payment and pre-approval letter for a condo. I saved it all in a folder on my phone called Half the Woman. I didn't know exactly how or when I'd bring it up. But I knew this time I wouldn't stay silent. The restaurant was everything my parents would love. Dim lighting, crisp white linens, polished silverware, and waiters hovering like hawks ready to swoop at a moment's notice. I walked in, dressed simply but confidently. No designer labels, no flashy jewelry. Just me. Quiet, steady, and finally unshakable. The family was already seated when I arrived. Sophia was glowing as usual, dressed in a sequined dress that sparkled under the chandelier's light. She laughed at something her boyfriend said, and the room tilted around her like she was the sun. My parents greeted me with their usual thin smiles. "Emily, you made it," Mom said, her voice polite but distant. Dad nodded, eyes scanning me as if trying to measure my worth against the fancy plates and crystal glasses. I took a seat, placed my phone on the table, and waited. As the courses arrived, first the soup, then the salad. I listened to the usual chatter. Sophia recounted a recent pitch meeting, her voice dripping with self-assurance. She told me she'd never met anyone like me before. Sophia bragged, swirling her wine. I'm telling you, Emily, if you worked half as hard as I do, maybe you'd get somewhere. A silence fell across the table. I felt a familiar burn in my chest, but this time it wasn't shame. It was fuel. I met her gaze calmly. Actually, Sophia, I began, voice steady, I do work hard, harder than you think. Eyes turned to me, curious. I've been building my own business for 3 years. I unlocked my phone and tapped the folder I had prepared. The screen lit up with neat slides, screenshots of websites I'd built, glowing client testimonials, sales reports, bank balances. $84,000, I said, watching the numbers scroll by. I looked at my parents. That's how much I've saved from freelance work, digital products, and consulting. I'm quitting my 9 to 5 next month to focus on my business full-time, and I'm moving into my own condo in 3 months. A beat. Sophia's mouth opened, then closed. My mother's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her glass. My dad's confident mask cracked. You did all this, Dad finally said, voice a little too loud for the restaurant. I nodded, yes. While you were busy saying I was half the woman Sophia is, I was quietly building my own future. The table went silent. Sophia's smile faded into something I couldn't quite read: shock, embarrassment, maybe even respect. I leaned forward. Maybe I'm not half the woman Sophia is. I said softly, maybe I'm double. The words hung in the air like a challenge and a victory all at once. Then I stood up, slipping my phone back into my purse. Thanks for dinner, I said, my voice calm but full of meaning. I walked out, head held high, tears pricking the corners of my eyes, not from sadness but pride. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. Later that night, I received a message from Sophia. Can we talk? I didn't know. I didn't reply immediately. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I wanted to make sure when I did, it was on my terms. I had finally taken control of my story. The quiet girl, with no flashy degrees or perfect Instagram. The girl, they said, was safe and average. I was anything but. I was Emily, and I was more than enough.